Are you prepared for what's in store for you at Disneyland Paris? Disneyland Paris is a dream destination for people to visit where they get to meet their favourite Disney characters, go on iconic rides and see the beautiful castle. But there are some things that come as a shock to visitors. So today I'm going to let you know the biggest shocks you're going to encounter, both bad and good, when visiting Disneyland Paris. My name is Sophie from Most Magical Guides and I make videos packed full of tips and advice to help you visit the Disney parks like a pro, helping you to maximise the magic by mastering the planning. I also do vlogs of my own adult and solo trips, so if you do like that type of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so that you never miss a video. I think most people like to start with the bad news and then go on to the good news, so let's start with the bad shocks. Something you will hear a lot of people be shocked to see in Disneyland Paris is people smoking around the parks. Now, Disneyland Paris does offer designated smoking areas, and where the parks are quite small, you're never more than a few minutes walk away from any of them. However, a lot of guests don't tend to listen to this advice and head to them. Instead, they just smoke wherever they fancy. And if you are from a country where smoking is kind of banned in public places like the UK, it's very unusual to see people stood in queues next to you smoking, walking around the park smoking, or when you're waiting for the fireworks, people smoking around you. It's just very weird to see because we're not used to it. Now, the cast members are meant to stop people smoking outside of the designated smoking areas and direct them to them. And if they catch people, they will, but oftentimes you will see a lot of people flying under the radar, so you will spot this around the parks. Now, I do have to say, you are not going to be wading through smoke. It's not something that you're going to be like every single day surrounded, but because it is so unusual to see, it will be distinct when you see it, and during your trip you probably will see it a couple of times. If you have visited US Disney parks where there's no smoking allowed whatsoever, in fact you have to leave the park to go to the smoking areas, it will be a shock to even see smoking areas inside Disneyland Paris. But I think because they've made it so easy for people to still be able to smoke and they only have to walk a few minutes, it's not difficult to follow the rules. So it is a shame that you do spot this, but like I say, it's not going to be something that every single day you're like wading your way around trying to get through the smoke, but when you do spot it, it is quite shocking because we're not used to it. The next shock you might find is bad food. France being a country that is so proud of its cuisine, it is a surprise that you don't see a lot of quality food in Disneyland Paris. Now, there are some restaurants where you can get great meals, and I will link to a video I've done all about the best restaurants at Disneyland Paris. However, you will find other restaurants where it's very, very subpar, it's kind of typical theme park fare, and you're just like, okay, it's doable, but it's not great. And the food can be very pricey, and particularly when you're paying quite a lot for the food, it is a disappointment when it isn't up to par. There's also times where you'll go to restaurants and the food is kind of lukewarm. So let's try the chakalaka and see what it's like. The flavour's really good. It's like a really rich tomato flavour. Lots of like beans, chickpeas, stuff like that inside. The rice is nicely cooked. It is a little bit cool. We did wait for a very long time, so I don't know if they're just really behind on orders. And it's just one of those things that I think Disneyland Paris could improve on. If you've been to the US parks, you can find some really good dining there. So when you visit Disneyland Paris, being in a country so obsessed with food, you would expect the food to be on the same level or even above it. And unfortunately, you're not going to find that. But do check out that video so you can know where the best food can be found. And I would say if you do get your food and it is cold or anything like that, do take it back and see if they will make you a fresh batch, because there is nothing worse than having to chow down on something subpar when you've paid a lot for it. Something else that shocks people when they visit Disneyland Paris is the weather. And I think it catches people unawares because in the winter it could be unbelievably cold, but in the summer it could be unbelievably hot. I visited Disneyland Paris in January before and it's been -5. My left eye keeps watering, so for once I'm not actually crying the second I've got to Disney. It's just, I think the cold is currently -3, but with all these layers on I feel quite comfortable, so good news, I've packed enough layers. In fact, actually, I've just looked, the lake is frozen over. I've also visited in May and it's been over 30 degrees. So Disneyland Paris does have quite a lot of different types of weather. It is now super hot and I'm gonna go and have to put some more sun cream on because it's like being on a proper holiday now. What I would say is in the lead up to your trip, be checking that weather forecast and pack for all occasions. I always like to take layers with me because sometimes it might be cold in the morning but warm in the evening, so you can match your outfit to whatever is most comfortable with the weather. And also things like I always take a little umbrella or a rain jacket with me because even if you're visiting the height of summer, you can sometimes get these unexpected rainstorms. So just be prepared for a little bit of everything. Something else people aren't necessarily prepared for is how much you end up walking. Because Disneyland Park and Walt Disney Studios Park are quite small, plus they're next to each other so they're easy to walk between, you do actually not realise how many steps you are doing. Because everything feels so close, you think you're just having a little jaunt, but by the end of the day your feet can really hurt, and then you look at your stepometer or whatever you have, your little Fitbit with you, and you've done 20,000-30,000 steps. It's amazing how those steps add up, and I think because the parks are so small and it's so easy to get between them, you love to park hop into Disney Village, and because of that you don't realise how much you're walking. So what I would say is just make sure you add some breaks into your day. That could be going back to your hotel, or it could even be as simple as having a sit down meal, or going to see some of the amazing shows at Disneyland Paris. They have some of the best shows in any Disney park in the world. All about the best shows, so do go check that out so you can find out which ones you might want to watch during your trip. But they're around 30 minutes long. They're a really good way to rest your feet, and you are definitely going to need to be able to take time in your day to rest your feet, because otherwise by the end of the day you are in so much pain and you're in such a bad mood that the magic has gone. So avoid this, don't be caught out, don't get shocked by the amount of steps you do, and take some breaks in your day. Another big shock can be how long the queues are to meet the characters. I have to say, out of all of the Disney parks I've been to, Disneyland Paris has the longest queues by far. To meet Mickey Mouse is almost always over an hour, and the Princess Pavilion can be often 2 to 3 hours. I've even seen it up to 6 hours long. And even some of the meet and greets which are just dotted around the park. I've seen people wait to meet Stitch for 45 minutes, Olaf for an hour and 15 minutes. The queues are really long to meet the characters. And this can be a big shock. No one kind of expects to wait in the longest queues of the day to meet characters. You'd think that would be rides. So I would say just go in prepared, and what you might want to do is instead do a character dining meal. This way you'll get to meet multiple characters at once and you'll be saving so much time. They can be a bit pricey, but there are multiple character dining meals at Disneyland Paris that all feature different characters, so you can pick the one that has the characters you want to meet the most. Something people can be a bit surprised about when they visit Disneyland Paris is how much French is in the parks. Now that does sound silly to say because of course if you are in France you are going to be hearing French, but a lot of the ride narration and a lot of the shows will be in French.
Comment ça va? Je suis Peter Parker. Ici chez Web, on a accès à une super technologie, comme le vibranium du Wakanda ou ce fluide extraterrestre dément. On a les particules de Pym et Star Trek.
Now what I would say is with the rides, sometimes they will alternate between French and English, so it's kind of potluck as to which presentation you see. And with the shows, Disneyland Paris have done this really amazing thing where they will do it partly in French and partly in English, but they do it in a really clever way, so you can absolutely follow along with the storyline even if you don't speak French. So as silly as it sounds, do be prepared to hear a lot of French when you're in Disneyland Paris, because of course that is the language of the country, so it is to be expected. And on the same theme, sometimes people are quite shocked when they meet characters and they get autographs that they will be signing in their French names. Now, it is interesting because I don't know if everyone realises that the characters have different names in different countries. For example, Chip and Dale are known as Tic and Tac in French. So sometimes if you get autographs, they will be signing their French name. Sometimes if you speak to them and they hear their name in English, they will then know, oh, I'll sign in English, but sometimes it's just like an automatic thing. So don't be surprised if sometimes you get an autograph and it's a name you're not expecting. And one of the shocks that is always difficult to address, but I think does need mentioning, is the rudeness that you will sometimes experience. Now, I would say that I think sometimes it's not necessarily rudeness, I think it's a different culture, and things that we maybe may see as impolite might just be it's more direct and we're just not used to that. However, I won't lie, I have experienced the odd cast member who has been rude, and I have experienced quite a lot of guests that have been rude. So it is just one of those things, you have to just roll with it, don't let it ruin your day. Hopefully it won't happen very often, and like I say, for me, if it's been a cast member, it's something that stuck with me just because it really stands out. It's not going to be an everyday occurrence, it's not something you're going to kind of experience all the time, but it could occasionally happen. So I would just try and go with the good, remember all of the amazing interactions you have, and if you have someone who is a bit rude or maybe guests that are a bit rude, try and brush it off and just enjoy the Disney magic and hope that one day in their hearts they'll find the Disney magic. This is always a controversial thing to bring up, and it's something that people don't really want to address because you don't want to be seen to be culturally insensitive or things like that, but it is inevitable. Every time I speak to people, the thing that comes up is I was so shocked at the rudeness and I wasn't expecting it. So if you are used to having visited the US parks where customer service is key and they really want to serve you well, it may be a bit of a different experience in Disneyland Paris, so just be aware of that. Before we went in, we had some amazing cast members. As you're walking in, there's some cast members waiting, and one of them had a crow on his shoulder. I said, oh, I like your shoulder plush, and he was like, it's not a shoulder plush. And I thought, I was like, okay, I'll just go here. But then it was a 13-minute wait sign, so I had to take a photo of it. But what I didn't realise is he followed me and he was stood behind me. So when I turned around, I jumped out of my skin. Huh? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for you.
I'm sorry too. Okay, but why?
Peter, don't with the van.
Wait a minute. Do you want to go to the wedding like this?
Okay, the fact is I'm not going to the wedding.
The wedding? You are going to the wedding.
Okay.
For sure, the wedding of your life. Don't be late.
He was incredible. So big up to Florian, and also Florence inside. She was hilarious and spooky too. But now let's talk about the good shocks when you visit Disneyland Paris. First up is that if you buy a hotel package, you get your Disney tickets included in the price. This is incredibly rare and not many people realise that is the case. So sometimes you may be pricing up your trip and looking at an off-site hotel, but once you add the cost of buying tickets on top, it could be almost the same price as staying at a Disneyland Paris hotel because you get your tickets for free if you stay there. So I would definitely recommend doing a price match and having a little look to see what would be better for you. And oftentimes you will find the prices aren't that much more expensive at Disneyland Paris if you stay in one of their hotels, because you get those park tickets included, and then you get the other perks such as extra magic hours and being so close to the parks. All the hotels are within a 15-minute walk or a few minutes bus journey. You are in that bubble the whole time, so it's definitely worth staying on site if you can. Another good shock people find is that the rides are some of the best versions of Disney rides in any park in the world. So things like Tower of Terror, Space Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, all routinely voted the best in the world. So do make sure you hit up those big iconic rides, because you're going to have an experience like no other, and it will probably end up being your favourite version of the ride you've ever been on. This next one, did feature on the bad list, but it's also on the good list, and that is just how walkable the parks are. Because they are smaller in size and they're right next door to each other, their Disney Village is next door to that, and the hotels are just behind that, it is so easy to get around, and it's much more manageable than somewhere like Disney World where the parks are so huge and there's just so much walking involved. The downside is, because they're much more walkable, sometimes you don't realise how much you are walking, which is why they were also on the bad list. But I think one of the biggest benefits is that you can so easily go between the parks, you can park hop, you can have a little break at your hotel, have a little look at the shops in Disney Village. You can be completely flexible with your schedule because everything is so close to each other. You don't need to plan out lots of things in an itinerary. Another great shock is just how beautiful Disneyland Park is. This is a really stunning park, and as we all know, the castle again is voted one of the best in the world. It is beautiful, and something I always love at Disneyland Paris is when you go in the parks in the mornings, you have this beautiful like golden light, and the parks are just visually stunning. It is a perfect time to get photos, and everything just looks incredible. Frontierland is super spectacular. The second you walk through that archway and you see Big Thunder Mountain out on its own island, it's beautiful. And Discoveryland has that kind of steampunk Jules Verne type feel, and it's really awesome, particularly at night. There are so many awesome photo spots you will find in Disneyland Paris because it is so beautiful, so make sure you get ready to take lots of amazing photos during your trip. Another good shock is something we touched upon earlier, and that is if you stay at Disneyland Paris Hotel, you get extra magic hours. This means you get to go into the park an hour earlier than day guests, and this is brilliant. This is probably one of the best perks for any Disney hotel because it means you get to go on all the big rides with a much shorter queue time. I've managed to walk onto Big Thunder Mountain multiple times. Rides such as Peter Pan, which is often over an hour-long queue in the day, you can go on within 10 or 15 minutes, and it is such a big benefit because you can get those big rides out first thing in the morning, and then when the queues get busier later in the day, you don't need to worry because you've already ridden them. Another thing that can be a shock in a good way is how incredible the shows are. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of shows at Disneyland Paris. In fact, there's more than I think in any other Disney park that I've been to, and they are all Broadway level productions. You are not just going to be seeing a few characters wandering around on stage and maybe waving. These are full out West End style shows. They often last around 30 minutes in length, and they also have a whole host of different Disney characters in them. So they're a really great place to go and spot some rare characters and some of your favourites. And the final good shock is just how magical Disneyland Paris is. I think a lot of people think because it is a smaller park that maybe it won't have as much magic as somewhere like Disney World, but you really do feel it in the air. It is such a charming and beautiful park, and I love that it has its own distinct personality. Like I say, you can get some incredible photographs with the beautiful scenery, you're going to get to go on some of the most amazing rides in any Disney park in the world, and you're going to get to see world-class shows. So if you are thinking of taking a trip to Disneyland Paris, it is absolutely worth it. If you'd like to learn some tips on how to visit Disneyland Paris like a pro, make sure you stick around to the end because I have a playlist ready for you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, I hope you have a most magical day. Bye bye.